An art which has an aim to achieve the beauty is called a philosophy, or in the absolute sense it is named wisdom. A just city should favor justice and the just, hate tyranny and injustice, and give them both their just deserts. To accept something on mere presumption and, likewise, to fail to investigate it may cover over, blind, and lead astray. Philosophy precedes a religion in the time. A man becomes a person thanks to the intellect. We can achieve happiness only then when we have a beauty, and we have a beauty thanks to philosophy. The truth is that only because of philosophy we can achieve happiness.
Dear viewers, welcome to a new episode of Names from the Past. Today we're going to talk about Al-Farabi. Well, Arabs were the pioneers of most sciences that nowadays scientists have excelled in. They have planted the seeds, and we are harvesting the fruit of their science and research and the scientific discoveries they made. Today, we select one of these scientists, Al-Farabi. Al-Farabi was passionate about science. He studied medicine, philosophy, physics, and other sciences. He was called the second tutor after Aristotle, who was called the first tutor. He was interested in the compositions of Aristotle. He worked on explaining them and modifying them, as well as organizing them in a scientific manner to facilitate transferring them to the philosophers after him.
Abu Nasr Muhammad Al-Farabi. He is Abu Nasr Muhammad bin Uzlug bin Tarkan Al-Farabi. He was born in the year 874 in the city of Fاراب in the region of Turkestan. He is a Muslim philosopher who was famous for mastering philosophical sciences, and he had a role in manufacturing medicine. He was known as Al-Farabi in regard to the city he lived in which is Fárab. His father was a leader in the army. He lived for a while in Baghdad and then moved to Egypt. He roamed in several countries and then settled in Damascus until he died in the year 950.
Today, we will dive into the world of the second teacher, Abu Nasr al-Farabi. Abu Nasr al-Farabi was a renowned medieval Muslim philosopher and scientist who earned the title of the second teacher due to his extensive commentaries and treatises on Aristotle, who was known as the first teacher.
He was the first founder of the Islamic philosophy, which affected the world at a later stage.
He is the one who introduced the concept of vacuum to physics. He influenced both Ibn Sina and Ibn Rushd. He composed many workbooks. One of the most famous of these is a book in which he listed the types and kinds of sciences, and this book is called The Classification of Sciences. Al-Farabi was very famous throughout history. He was tutored by the Dr. Johanna ibn Hilan and Abe Bashar bin Yunus in Baghdad, the most famous translators of the Greek language.
Al-Farabi's works were highly influential among Muslim intellectuals of the time, and his commentaries on Aristotle's works were seen as a continuation of the great philosopher's legacy. He was so influential, to the point that his face is on the Kazakh currency. His works on logic, metaphysics, mathematics, and music have been studied and admired for centuries, and his legacy continues to be celebrated in Kazakhstan today. Abu Nasr al-Farabi was a renowned philosopher who founded his own school of early Islamic philosophy known as Farabism or Al-Farabism.
While the anecdote may very well be a legend, Al-Farabi, who would come to be known as Al-Farabius or Abu Nasr in the West, contributed substantial knowledge to the medieval world, from the Eastern to the Western Hemisphere. Widely respected as a key pioneer of advancing commentary and building upon the exegeses of the ancients, Al-Farabi would be celebrated as the bridge that facilitated the continuity of deep thought from the earlier masters of philosophy to the Middle Ages, earning him the nickname of the Second Master. While Al-Farabi's name indicates that he was born somewhere in the region of Fاراب, it is unknown where exactly in the Central Asian area he may have hailed from. Nevertheless, this hasn't stopped modern universities in the Central Asian Khorasan region claiming him as a national emblem. Al-Farabi was born in 872 CE in the Abbasid Caliphate, most likely to a father who worked as a captain in the Persian army, though probably being of Turkish or Turkoman heritage. Growing up in the ancient city of Damascus, Al-Farabi eventually became known as a generally introverted character, and one who displayed traits of modesty and asceticism. Yet, being a man of outlandish attire, the occasional acts of showmanship are also attributed to him, presumably due to his intimate rapport with the governors and elites of the empire later in his life. Living through the reign of 6 caliphs, Al-Farabi offered his academic services across the caliphate, and was greatly admired by a Hamdani prince in Aleppo who advocated many educational policies. As well as this, Al-Farabi also offered educational aid across the oases of North Africa. Yet, like nearly all scholars of the time, he could not avoid being lured to the intellectual centre of the medieval world, Baghdad, and migrated by the age of 40. By now an accomplished thinker and a man who displayed a love for knowledge over religious division, Al-Farabi studied, debated, and worked in a cosmopolitan fashion, with famous names of the age, including a certain Christian scholar by the name of Yahya ibn Adi. It was with him where Al-Farabi would be described by future historians as the first truly systematic philosopher in Islam, tirelessly striving in the fields of logic, political philosophy, metaphysics, and music. Al-Farabi became one of the greatest expositors of the works of Plato and Aristotle, writing commentaries and comprehensive introductions on their works.
Al-Farabi studied different sciences in his homeland, where he read many books about science, literature, philosophy, and languages, especially Turkish, in addition to other languages like Arabic, Persian, and Greek. One of the most important accomplishments of Al-Farabi is creating the first approach for a human encyclopedia and its sciences in his time. He was the first to talk about the social contract theory. He also had a clear role in the field of music. He was the one who developed the Qanun musical instrument, and he was the first to describe al-rababa instrument. Moreover, he was the first to redefine music. He created some musical terms and names of sounds that are used until our day.
Teachings were highly influential in the Islamic world, and his philosophy focused on the idea of a unified universe. And he was a prominent person on the idea with the proponent knowledge that it should be acquired through observation and experimentation. He was an esteemed philosopher after all. He also believed that the universe was composed of 4 elements: air, water, fire, and earth. Al-Farabi's teachings have been studied and discussed by scholars for centuries, and his influence on Islamic philosophy is still felt today. No wonder he's also dubbed the second Aristotle.
He studied Arabic linguistics with Ibn al-Sarraj. He also studied medicine, logic, and social science through following up with the publications of Aristotle and quoting from them. Al-Farabi was an ascetic. He did not get married and did not care about money. His entire interest was in reading and in classification. He loved solitude and used to spend long hours in meditation and thinking, roaming around in gardens and on rivers and beaches. There, he composed most of his publications, and his students used to go to him to get the knowledge. Al-Farabi composed many books and research during his life and his travels. In physics, he composed Al-Rafiya, articles in the origins of nature science.
A definition of philosophy and her sense consists in her assignment that it is a science about the being as a being. If boy would not fall in love, girl is not worthy of love. The greatest of virtues is science. State which is established by love continues with justice. Just as the health of the body is an equilibrium of its temperament, and its sickness is a deviation from equilibrium, so, too, are the health of the city, and its uprightness an equilibrium of the moral habits of its inhabitants, and its sickness a disparity found in their moral habits. Don't cry when a good person died. Cry for the society which lost him. Long-speaking people need to be listened to short. A society hears with love, lives with justice and survives with honest work. He who speaks well does not hear bad words from anyone.
Al-Farabi was the first to define the relation between mathematics and music. He also proposed the idea of the change of musical taste. Al-Farabi practiced the art of singing. He used to play on the oud, which is the lute, and used to sing when he was a young boy. As a grown-up, he stopped singing, but he didn't abandon music and kept studying it. Al-Farabi was famous for being smart and for his ideas that achieved many successes, in addition to the big role they played in the lives of people. One of the most important ideas which Al-Farabi called upon was the theory of knowledge. He believed that the human knowledge is there from the time the human is born.
For later philosophers to use. He wrote the most important medieval treatise on music, and as well as all this, he was further noted as an outstanding logician, linguist, and judge. Spending hours upon hours reading over, commenting upon, and discussing the works of the ancients, most of Al-Farabi's philosophical ideas stood upon the basis of Platonic and Aristotelian frameworks. In a similar fashion to Al-Kindi, he wrote much on the existence and nature of God, or a first being, a cause of all causes, eternal and free of any imperfection. Yet, what was more unique to Al-Farabi was his work on human behavior, the purpose of the soul, and man as a social and political being. Al-Farabi was united with Aristotle on the notion that human beings were not here for a life of seclusion. Human perfection, he wrote, for the sake of which human nature was ordered, is not possible without human association. At a time where many sought to realize their full potential by retreating to the deserts and forests, Al-Farabi maintained that the ultimate purpose of life lay within the pursuit of happiness, and that it was only through philosophical reasoning with fellow human beings that one could achieve true bliss and connection to God. He wrote out the practical guide to this in his famous book, Opinions of the Inhabitants of the Virtuous City. In it, he marks off society into three parts from general to specific. The world, which is constructed upon all the different nations of the planet, which in turn are made up of various city-states. Inspired by Plato's Republic, Al-Farabi attempts to conceive of a utopian city-state built upon a fusion of Islamic and Platonic virtues. Before presenting this ideal and perfect city, however, Al-Farabi draws our attention to the generic and defective cities we already reside in. Among them are the ignorant cities, the worst type for Al-Farabi, where no citizens seek true wisdom and knowledge. Instead, they are preoccupied with endeavours of wealth and pleasure. There also exist timocracies, where citizens are obsessed with power or honour, leading naturally to tyranny and despotism, and democracies, which lead to lawlessness and anarchy. There also exist wayward cities, whose citizens had apprehended God, the afterlife, and the moral code required, but had failed to practically live by it. Perverted cities, which although had once been on the correct path, diverted from righteousness. And erring cities, whose inhabitants failed to philosophize correctly, and thus held false beliefs about gods, and likely followed false prophets and charlatans. In opposition to all this, the virtuous city is one that through proper philosophy had apprehended God, the afterlife, and sincerely lived by virtue and avoided vices. One such virtue being justice, which, according to Al-Farabi, leads to the division of labour and class in humanity. And what follows from this is everyone contributing to their community according to their aptitude. The virtuous city's leader would be pious and intellectual, with qualities of justice, honesty, athleticism, eloquence, nobility, and courage. Yet, as long as people continue to live in ignorant, perverted, or wayward cities, they would never be able to recognize true virtue and never be able to live under a perfect ruler.
If we'll go back to why Kazakhstan esteems him to such a high state, it's because he is from modern-day Kazakhstan, and his works deserve to be recognized. For example, a large Kazakh university known as KazNU bears his name. There is also an Al-Farabi library on the university grounds, and in many cities of Kazakhstan, there are streets named after him. Plus, in November of 2021, a monument to Al-Farabi was unveiled in Nur Sultan, Kazakhstan. And there's one thing as well. If you ever go to England on Edgware Road, there's the Al-Farabi Pharmacy. And just like any other influential people who have been mentioned in this program, the main belt asteroid 7057 Al-Farabi was named in his honor. All in all, his legacy is as eternal as his knowledge, in which we are forever in his debt and gratitude. Until next time, stay tuned for more information regarding such remarkable historical figures in the Arab world.
And in the field of medicine, he composed the book A Chapter in Medicine, The Science of Mood and Weights, The Principles of Bodies and Diseases. And in the field of mathematics, the book of The Entrance to Delusional Architecture. And in the field of astronomy, the book A Comment of the Stars. And in the field of music, he composed The Big Music Book, The Entrance to Music Industry Book, Talk About Music Book, Rhythm Statistics Book. The Big Music Book is considered one of the most important books of Al-Farabi, which was translated into many languages, as well as the book The Classification of Sciences, which is one of the most important scientific books that many resort to as an inclusive scientific reference, because it has 6 parts that specify in different sciences, in addition to a book that is called Al-Huruf, in which he explains the difference between dialectic and fallacy.
Selected aphorisms that comprise the roots of many of the sayings of the ancients concerning that by which cities ought to be governed and made prosperous, the ways of life of their inhabitants improved, and they be led toward happiness. It explains that the ones through which what is truly happiness is obtained are the goods, the noble actions, and the virtues, that the rest are evils, base things, and imperfections, and that the way they are to exist in a human being is for the virtuous actions, and ways of life to be distributed in cities and nations in an orderly manner and to be practiced in common.
Al-Farabi had a huge impact on the Islamic philosophical culture and the different sciences. He was able to create a special intellectual school that was called Al-Farabiya School. Through it, he left us a substantial number of publications and books that serve as a reference for the students of science till today. I hope that you liked today's episode, and hopefully we will meet in a new episode with a new character.